Się nie nagrywa.
Hello! We would like to say something more about imagery in sport. I'm Dagmara Budnik-Przybylska.
I'm Maria Kaźmierczak.
And I'm Jacek Przybylski.
So, imagination and imagery has been present in literature, in psychology, in medicine, in various types of scientific domains, also in sport. But let us just refer to Lucy Mount Montgomery and Annie of Green Gables, who said imagination is something wonderful, but it should be controlled. Einstein said, I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. So what is imagery?
This is the ability to observe yourself on the screen of your mind. Imagery is a multisensorial mental representation of the image, of actions, or object and situation, without an actual experience, without appropriate sensory input. Images could be recalled from memory or could be a novel combination of stimuli. Michael Phelps said something like that. One of the things about my naps is this. If I'm sitting there right before I doze off or immediately after I get up, I can visualize how I want the perfect race to go. I can see the starts, the strokes, the walls, the turns, the finish, the strategy, all of it. It's so vivid that I can vividly see incredible detail down even to the wake behind me. It's my imagination at work, and I have a big imagination. Visualizing like this is like programming a race in my head, and that programming sometimes seems to make it happen just I had imagined it. First of all, we would like to present the revised applied model of deliberate imagery used for sport, dance, exercise and rehabilitation, Cumming and Williams. It is consisted of a couple of components: where and when, which is connected to the situation; who, individual; why, function of imagery; what, type and how we use imagery; personal meaning of all; and imagery ability, which can moderate or mediate connections between all of previous component and the outcome, which could be one or more, intentional or unintentional. Where and when, which is connected to the situation, and imagery is mainly used during training and competition, before, after, or during breaks. We can correct our mistakes, on recall some good parts of our training or competitions, etc. After and during the season, in free time, when recovering from injury, and Holman's colleagues said that environment should be similar to real one. For example, the same competition room, the same competition hall, etc.
When it comes to who, it's about individual, it's about athlete. So we have to consider gender. There are many studies comparing women and men in imagery, tendencies, preferences, abilities. So there are many similarities between women and men, but also we observe some differences during exercise of imagery, meaning that women tend to focus more or imagine appearance or health, whereas men tend to focus more on the technique itself. Of course, we have to include level of exercise. Athletes who are more at a higher level, they are more able, more prone to imagining many situations in sport. So they are higher at imagery ability skills than lower level athletes. As a psychologist, we have to also include individual characteristics like temperament or personality traits, and they had been focused on our studies as well. So putting the knowledge of imagery and the who component into practice, here you have some samples of our studies. When we ask about who is the athlete who is more able in imagery. So as you can see, we linked imagery and empathy. We also explored some neural mechanisms of imagery just to know what is the impact of imagery exercise on physiological mechanism. So what we showed is that there are some individual differences actually in imagery and in physiological responses, which depend on, for example, the level of anxiety of or neuroticism, or they are linked to empathy.
When we are talking about the function of imagery, we should differentiate between among different athletes. When someone do a perfect throw in their imagery in judo or a perfect tack in sailing, for one athlete it could be connected to improve execution, but for another athlete it could be connected to reduction in overstimulation. Meaning is between function and the content. The content of imagery can serve different functions. Imagery will be more effective if it is personalized and therefore more meaningful to the athlete. We can observe greater psychophysiological activity during that. We also may differentiate when it comes advancement in the level of skill used in performance. For example, training a particular technique for an Olympic team athlete, it will be different for novice athlete. When it comes to what? Type and content. We can use cognitive and motivational imagery, which will be presented in the next slide, 5V model. But also we can use images of anatomy, appearance, health, recovery, etc. The content should be chosen once the function to be performed by imagery has been established. And we also use timing of imagery. Sometimes we can use slow motion, real one. We also talk about length of the imagery, frequency, colors, senses, perspective, and how many sessions we should use during imagery. Here we have functions of imagery. We can use motivational and or cognitive functions, specific and general. When we are talking motivational specific, here we have goal-oriented imagery, when we can use the image of the winning or receiving a medal. When we are talking about cognitive specific, we can use imagery for specific skill for sport discipline. When we are talking about general motivational but arousal, we imagine our anxiety control to achieve a relaxed state or arousal state. During motivational general connected to mastery, we can use imagery for best performance to achieve self-confidence, mental toughness. When we use cognitive general function of imagery, we use imagery for strategy or tactic for our opponent or different discipline. We would like to present the Petlet model, which is consisted of a couple of components. First one, physical. This is the physical nature of imagery, which is connected to clothes, for example, body position, sport equipment, and everything connected to the specific task. Second is environment, and the imagery should be do in the environment similar to real one. For example, the same sport hall which the competition will take part, and so on. Next one is task. It should be connected to the specific task which will be done in this imagery, in this image. Another one is timing, which is connected to the chronometry of imagery. Normally, we should use real time, but sometimes we can slow down or doing our imagery more fast. Then, because of some particular elements that can be used in more faster way, and to stress the specific elements which can be slowed down. Another one is learning, which is connected to the level of our athletes with whom we cooperate with. The learning, the image should be more advanced when we cooperate with more advanced athletes. Another one is emotion. Emotions during imagery should be similar to real one. Sometimes we should cope with more stressful situation, then we should recall stress and, for example, anxiety, and how to cope with that. And the last one is perspective, which is connected to visual perspective, first one or the third one. First one is connected to image, which will be presented from our perspective. And the third one, when we observe ourselves on the screen. First one is more useful when we recall some specific situations, and we should feel the same sensations and see the same situation. But sometimes we can use the third one when it comes to correction of the error. Here we have also outcome. Outcome should be more intentional, but sometimes it could be unintentional when the outcome is different to that we would like to have. Outcome could be one or many, because sometimes we can use similar image for one purpose or for another one. We also should stress the ineffectiveness of imagery. When the anxiety is too high, or athlete characterized the distraction or lack of control over imagery, or also overconfidence, we should start to find that factors, and then we should work on such factors. Also, where there is lack of familiarity with the technique, then we can imagine inappropriate technique and then repeat the error. Sometimes athletes characterize the imagery of negative consequences instead of positive, and it will be poorer performance, but also deterioration of self-efficacy. Sometimes athletes use also the word no during imaging. For example, I don't want to lose, I don't want to do something, and then we stress opposite situation instead of that we should like to have. Here we have some articles connected to interventions. Here we have specific tips how to use imagery scripts, how to use imagery intervention in sport, and one example of using PetLab model during imagery. But also we have another articles when the imagery intervention was used to increase flow state and performance in competition, but also some general information about how imagery works. Here also we have the meta-analysis, the effects of imagery intervention in sport. Thank you for your attention.